I used to think love was supposed to feel steady. Not dramatic, not exhausting, just steady. Like two people quietly choosing each other every day without needing to prove anything. And for the longest time, I believed that's what I had with Isla. Before everything collapsed, my life with her felt simple in a way that didn't ask for explanations. I thought simplicity meant safety. I thought it meant we were building something real. I didn't realize it was just the soft silence before a storm I never saw coming. I can still remember the night I proposed. It wasn't some movie moment. It was just the two of us on her apartment rooftop, wrapped in winter air that made our breaths visible. I slid the ring toward her with hands shaking more than I'd ever admit. She whispered yes so quietly, yet it felt loud enough to echo through me for months. That memory became my strength. On the days I felt tired, on the nights I felt invisible, I told myself it was all temporary because we had a future. I didn't know the future I believed in was already slipping away in ways I couldn't feel yet. Looking back now, I realize I mistook calm for peace, when really it was just blindness. She had a demanding job, long hours, unpredictable days. At least that's what she told me. I never questioned it. I trusted her so deeply that even imagining doubt felt like disrespect. When she said she was tired, I believed her. When she said she had late meetings, I believed that too. Maybe I believed too much. Maybe I believed for both of us. My routine was simple. Work, text her, wait for a reply that grew shorter over time. I didn't complain. I didn't push. I told myself people get busy, relationships go through phases. And even when the silence stretched a little longer each day, I convinced myself it was nothing. But the truth is, something inside me knew. Not loud enough to confront it, but just enough to make me feel a weight I couldn't name. A quiet ache that sat in my chest like a warning. I ignored it. One night I decided to surprise her. I brought her favorite dessert, rehearsing stupid lines in my head like some lovesick teenager. But when she opened the door, the expression she wore wasn't surprise. It was unease. Her hair, her makeup, the untouched apartment. Everything about that moment felt wrong. But I pushed those thoughts away so quickly it almost felt desperate. She said I should have told her I was coming. I laughed it off because I didn't want tension. I didn't want distance. I didn't want to accept that something between us had already changed. But that night was the beginning. The first crack. The first moment where the air between us felt heavier than her excuses. And somewhere deep inside me, I felt the storm approaching. I just didn't know yet that it would destroy everything I thought was safe, including the man I used to be. Because back then, I still believed she was mine. Back then, I didn't know the truth already lived inside her. And it wasn't mine at all. Love doesn't fall apart in one dramatic moment. It slips away quietly, the way a room dims without you noticing the sun has already set. And in those weeks after that strange night at her apartment, that's exactly what started happening between me and Isla. Not loudly, not violently, just enough that something deep inside me tightened every time I looked at her. She began retreating into herself, like someone slowly closing a door they no longer want you to walk through. Our conversations shrank into small, hollow exchanges. Her good morning texts shifted from warm messages to quick, careless replies that felt more like obligations than affection. Even her smile, it faded. She'd smile because she knew she should, but it disappeared before it even reached her eyes. And then the phone, face down always, a tiny detail, yet somehow louder than any argument. The late nights followed. At first, the explanations sounded reasonable. Over time, client meetings, reports that needed fixing. And because she was my fiancée, because I trusted her more than I trusted myself, I swallowed every excuse like it was truth. But trust has a way of making you blind to what you don't want to see. One night, I called just to check if she'd eaten. She didn't pick up. An hour later, she called back sounding breathless, scattered, like her voice was trying to catch up to her heartbeat. She brushed it off. Paperwork, noise, didn't hear her phone. But there was something in her tone that didn't sit right. Something sharp. Something uneasy. I felt it. I just didn't want to believe it. The distance grew clearer when she stopped caring about our wedding. She used to light up at the simplest things: flower colors, menu options, silly decoration ideas. Now, every time I mentioned it, she shut down. Later. Not now. Work is crazy. Work became her shield. Work became the reason for everything she didn't want to talk about. Still, I tried. One night I asked gently if she was okay. She froze, just for a second, and then forced a smile that felt so painfully fake it almost broke me. She told me not to overthink. But I wasn't overthinking. I was watching the woman I loved drift so far away that her voice barely reached me anymore. And then came the Thursday that changed everything. I finished early and stopped by her office to pick her up. Nothing special, just me trying to be thoughtful. But when I asked the security guard to call her down, he said she'd left an hour ago. An hour. Called her. She answered sounding worn out and said, without hesitation, that she was still at work. That lie, it didn't just sting. Cracked something inside me that had never cracked before. I didn't confront her. I didn't shout. I just stood there, staring at the empty hallway, feeling the weight of a truth I wasn't ready to hold. That night, sitting alone in my car, I saw my own reflection in the window. Tired, uncertain, and strangely hollow. It hit me then, whatever was happening. It wasn't small anymore. It wasn't stress. It wasn't work. It was a fracture. The first real break. And soon, that crack would shatter everything I thought we still were. Nothing was ever going to be the same again. I should have sensed it long before that day. The distance, the excuses, the nights she didn't come home until late. All the little signs that whispered warnings I refused to hear. But love makes men like me believe in things that aren't real. It blinds you. It softens the edges of truth until the lies look harmless. And then suddenly, everything sharpens at once. It happened with a phone call. No trembling in her voice. No hesitation. Just a steady calm that felt rehearsed, like she had practiced this moment again and again until she could say the words without breaking. I need to tell you something. My heart tightened, but I still smiled. Still hopeful. Still stupid. I thought maybe she was stressed. Maybe she needed comfort. Maybe this was one of those conversations couples grow from. I was ready to listen, to help, to be the man she could lean on. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. I'm pregnant. For a moment, the world fell completely silent. I heard nothing. Not the hum of the AC, not my own breathing, not even her voice anymore. Just those two words echoing through me like thunder in an empty room. I repeated them back because part of me didn't believe I heard her right. You're pregnant. Yes. And then, the sentence that tore through my chest like a blade dipped in ice. And it's not yours. Everything inside me collapsed. My thoughts stopped. My body felt like stone. I didn't even feel the phone in my hand anymore. I was holding nothing. I was standing on nothing. I was nothing. What do you mean it's not mine? My voice barely made it out. It sounded like it belonged to someone else. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She didn't break the way I did. Her tone stayed disturbingly calm. I never wanted it to happen this way, but it happened, and I just hope you can accept it. I don't want anger between us. Accept it. Those words rang louder than the confession. Accept that she had carried another man's child. Accept that the woman I was going to marry had been lying to me while sharing a life with someone else behind closed doors. Accept that the future I'd built in my head was already dead. My mind kept replaying her voice, soft, steady, asking me to understand. Understand what? That she had destroyed us? That she had betrayed every promise we ever made? I sat alone in my apartment that night, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I didn't recognize myself. My face looked pale, hollow, stunned, like someone who had watched his whole world burn in front of him and didn't even have the strength to scream. I kept whispering her words to the empty room. You want me to accept it? But the part of me that loved her, it withered in a single moment. And what rose in its place was something cold and raw and pulsing beneath my skin. I realized the man I used to be, the man who trusted, who believed, who loved without fear, died the moment she said it's not yours. What remained was a storm, Quiet for now, but alive. Growing. Ready. I didn't leave right away. Not because I had anything left to fight for. Not because I still believed in us. I stayed because my body refused to move, like grief had chained my limbs to the floor. My chest felt hollow, like something had reached inside and scraped out everything that once made me feel alive. So I stayed in the apartment we once called ours. The place that held laughter in the walls and warmth in the blankets. The place that used to feel like a home, and now felt like the aftermath of an explosion. A crime scene with no witnesses. Her perfume still clung to the pillows. Her hair tie sat abandoned on the nightstand. Our framed photo smiled down at me like it belonged to another lifetime. Every memory stabbed deeper, not because they were gone, but because they were never real the way I believed they were. Couldn't eat. Food tasted like cardboard. Couldn't sleep. My mind replayed everything she'd said, everything she'd hidden. I didn't even cry, not at first. It was like my emotions were trapped under ice, frozen somewhere too deep for me to reach. When people asked if I was okay, I lied without hesitation. Yeah, I'm fine. Because how do you explain a heartbreak so heavy it crushes the air out of your lungs? How do you tell someone that your soul feels like it's dissolving inside you? At night, I wandered aimlessly through the city. The streets were empty, the world asleep, but I stayed awake, haunted. The streetlights stretched my shadow across the pavement, long and thin, like it was trying to outrun me, like even my shadow wanted to escape what I had become. I felt invisible, unwanted, erased, and sometimes, in the middle of that darkness, anger flickered, cold and sharp. Not the kind that shouts or breaks things. The quiet kind. The kind that lives in your bones. The kind that whispers, how could she? I'd stand in front of the mirror, staring at the man looking back. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with sleepless nights. His shoulders sagged under a weight he never asked for. He looked like a stranger wearing my skin. Is this me? I'd ask the reflection. Was this the man she once loved? Or just the man she walked away from without hesitation? I sifted through every memory, every detail, trying to find the moment everything changed. But the truth was worse. I had no idea when she stopped loving me, but I knew exactly when I stopped loving myself. Days blurred into nights and nights into something colder. I felt like a ghost floating through my own life, a heartbeat without a purpose. Yet even in that suffocating darkness, something faint stirred inside me. Not hope, not strength, just a small, stubborn ember that refused to die. An ember that whispered, quietly but relentlessly, you are still here, you are still breathing, and one day you will rise. I didn't believe it then, I barely heard it, but that tiny ember would become the spark that changed everything. I didn't notice it at first, not in any obvious way. Not like a lightning strike or a sudden jolt. But one morning, as sunlight spilled across the floor, thin and golden, I realized I was still alive, not just moving or breathing like a machine, truly alive. Something faint stirred inside me, a pulse of defiance I hadn't felt in weeks, something that whispered I wasn't finished. The despair that had held me for so long didn't disappear overnight. It lingered, quiet and heavy, like a shadow at the edges of every thought. But the ember, the one I had buried beneath pain and anger, it flickered again. And this time I noticed it. I couldn't let her betrayal define me. I couldn't allow her choices to dictate the value of my life. Not anymore. It began with small things. A walk through a park I hadn't visited in months. A cup of coffee in a cafe that smelled like yesterday's memories. I watched people arguing, laughing, living, and for the first time in weeks I realized I wanted to live too. I reached out to friends I had pushed away. At first, the energy was forced. I smiled through the ache. But slowly, the smiles became real. Their laughter reminded me that life didn't end with heartbreak, that even broken hearts can keep beating. Then I turned to work. Not to prove anything to her, not to anyone else. I worked to prove it to myself. Every project I completed, every goal I crushed, every late night spent improving who I was, each one reminded me that I was still capable. still standing, still breathing. The man she thought she had destroyed, he wasn't gone. But the most important transformation was inside. I realized forgiveness wasn't for her. It wasn't to ease her conscience or make her life simpler. It was for me. I started talking to myself differently. You are worthy. You are strong. You don't need anyone to complete you. I trained my body, not for revenge, not to make anyone jealous. I trained to feel the rhythm of my own heartbeat, the strength in my hands, the power in my own presence. I read books I had ignored, stories of people who had fallen, who had broken, who had clawed themselves back into the light. Each page whispered the same truth. You can rise. You will rise. One evening, I found myself on the rooftop of my building. The city stretched endlessly beneath me, lights flickering like stars fallen to earth. I breathed in the cold air. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't trapped in despair. I felt possibility. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the pain, they hadn't destroyed me. They had cleared the way for something stronger. A stronger me, a wiser me, a me who could survive devastation and still keep his soul intact. I made a silent vow. I would rise. I would reclaim myself. And when the time came, I would face her and the world with the man I had become. The ember of despair had become a flame of determination. And now, I was ready to burn brighter than I ever had before. Gone. The man I had been, the one who crumpled under her betrayal, was gone. In his place stood someone quieter, sharper, heavier with purpose. Someone who had stared into the abyss of heartbreak and refused to fall again. Someone who understood that pain could break you, but it could also forge you. I began small. A morning run through the park, the air cold and sharp in my lungs, legs burning with effort. Every drop of sweat reminded me, I am alive. I am still fighting. I am still mine. Then came work. Projects I once tolerated, late nights I endured, networking I avoided, they became tools. Weapons to carve out a life that no one could touch. Not her. Not anyone. Each completed project, each goal achieved, reminded me that the life I rebuild belongs to me and only me. The change wasn't only physical. It was mental, emotional, something deeper. I stood taller. I spoke clearer. I carried myself with a confidence I hadn't known before, and it wasn't arrogance. It was ownership. People noticed. Colleagues who had once dismissed me now sought my input. Friends who had feared I would collapse watched as I rebuilt a world that had nearly been stolen. And then there was how I carried myself around her. Not that she saw me yet, not that I needed her to, but when our paths did cross, I knew. The new me would speak louder than words. She would see what she lost, and it would not matter if she acknowledged it or not. Life beyond the pain began to reopen itself. I traveled, even for brief escapes. I explored interests I had shelved for love. Cooking classes, seminars, nights out with people I barely knew. I laughed without guilt, without hesitation. And slowly, the void she left behind began to fill. Not with revenge, not with longing, but with myself. One evening, at a gallery opening, surrounded by color and chaos, art and conversation, I felt it again. Joy, not fleeting, not tinged with memories of her. Pure, bright, alive. And in that moment, I realized rising wasn't about anger. It wasn't about proving anything to her. It was about reclaiming a life I nearly let slip through my fingers. I began keeping a journal. 1 page a day for me. My thoughts, my plans, my dreams. Each word a brick. Each entry a foundation for a life rebuilt stronger than before. The embers of despair had become flames. Flames that no longer consumed me, but illuminated the path ahead. Her betrayal had been the spark. My rise would be the storm. I didn't need to seek revenge. The world balances itself. My task was simple. Live fully, rise higher, shine brighter. Every morning I woke stronger. Every goal I crushed reminded me that I was no longer the man who waited for betrayal to strike. I was the man who survived it. And survival, I realized, was only the beginning. I didn't need to confront her. Not yet. Revenge isn't about shouting. It isn't about striking back in anger. is patience. It's watching the world turn slowly and letting it deliver the consequences while you remain untouchable. I continued building my life. Every promotion I earned, every recognition I received, every small victory became a quiet statement. I survived. I rose. I was stronger than the person who had tried to destroy me. Meanwhile, she began to falter. I heard about it through whispers, careful, measured, indirect. Mutual acquaintances passing news like breadcrumbs. Her affair with Rayhan, the escape she had thought she'd found, was unraveling. And I watched. The first signs were subtle. Gossip, mistakes, flustered apologies.
Client complaining.
Colleagues noticing the distracted, disheveled woman who had once walked into rooms with quiet authority. The same woman who had asked me to accept the pregnancy without anger was now stumbling through the consequences of her own choices. I didn't gloat. I didn't mock. I simply observed. There's a power in silence. A power in letting the universe deliver punishment while you remain untouched, clean, rising above it all. And then came the professional consequences. Rayhan, it turned out, wasn't the man she believed him to be. His patience had limits. His charm had boundaries. One mismanaged report, one careless remark in a meeting, a slow-burning HR inquiry, and her career, the thing she had used as justification for her betrayal, began to crack. The confident, self-assured woman I had known was now scrambling, desperate, exposed. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to, because revenge isn't about forcing the storm. Revenge is becoming the storm. My rise, my strength, my unshakable presence. Those were the storm, and it reached her naturally, without my hand touching it. But my revenge wasn't only external. It ran deeper. I had rebuilt myself completely. My confidence, my sense of self, my life, all reclaimed. The betrayal that had once broken me had become fuel, and that fire burned brighter than anything she could touch. I walked through a crowded street one evening, dressed sharply, every movement deliberate. People noticed. Friends whispered, "You look different, stronger," and I felt it. Not just the strength in my body, but the strength in my heart. The kind that comes from surviving a storm intact. The kind that lets you move through life calmly, while chaos unfolds behind you. I knew she would realize eventually. She would understand what she lost. She would feel the weight of her choices. And when she did, I would be untouchable. Because revenge isn't breaking them. Revenge is building yourself so completely that their betrayal cannot harm you ever again. I had risen from the ashes. I had reclaimed my life. And now, the world was watching her stumble. In that silence, I felt something I hadn't in months. Quiet satisfaction, poetic justice, peace. The storm was coming for her, and I was already standing in the sun. She walked into my life again like a shadow from the past. A ghost I thought I had left behind. But I wasn't the same man who had crumbled under her betrayal. This time I stood solid, unshaken, untouchable. Her eyes widened when she saw me, not with love, not with longing. Shock? Maybe a flicker of fear, maybe even regret. For a heartbeat, it showed before she masked it with the practiced smile I had once adored. "You look different," she whispered, almost breathless. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. My presence spoke louder than any words could. She tried to explain. Excuses, apologies, half-truths. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the confidence she once wielded like armor. "I never wanted to hurt you. I was confused. I made mistakes." Her words fell like empty shells at my feet. I had heard enough, lived enough, grown enough. I looked at her. Not with anger, not with vengeance, not even with sadness. I looked at her with the quiet, unwavering strength of someone who had risen from the ashes. "You didn't just make mistakes," I said softly, deliberate, measured. "You made choices. Choices that changed everything. And I survived them. I thrived despite them. And now, you are too small to touch me." Her lips parted. I saw disbelief, the sudden realization that the man she had once controlled, the man she had assumed would silently accept betrayal, was gone. In his place stood someone she no longer recognized. Someone she could never influence again. Someone free. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to punish. I didn't need to humiliate. The silence itself was my triumph. Every success since her betrayal, promotions, travels, rebuilt confidence, stood as proof. Every part of my new life was a monument to the man she could no longer break. She walked into my life again like a shadow from the past. A ghost I thought I had left behind. But I wasn't the same man who had crumbled under her betrayal. This time I stood solid, unshaken, untouchable. Her eyes widened when she saw me, not with love, not with longing. Shock? Maybe a flicker of fear, maybe even regret. For a heartbeat, it showed before she masked it with the practiced smile I had once adored. "You look different," she whispered, almost breathless. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. My presence spoke louder than any words could. She tried to explain. Excuses, apologies, half-truths. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the confidence she once wielded like armor. "I never wanted to hurt you. I was confused. I made mistakes." Her words fell like empty shells at my feet. I had heard enough, lived enough, grown enough. I looked at her. Not with anger, not with vengeance, not even with sadness. I looked at her with the quiet, unwavering strength of someone who had risen from the ashes. "You didn't just make mistakes," I said softly, deliberate, measured. "You made choices, choices that changed everything. And I survived them. I thrived despite them. And now, you are too small to touch me." Her lips parted. I saw disbelief, the sudden realization that the man she had once controlled, the man she had assumed would silently accept betrayal, was gone. In his place stood someone she no longer recognized. Someone she could never influence again. Someone free. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to punish. I didn't need to humiliate. The silence itself was my triumph. Every success since her betrayal, promotions, travels, rebuilt confidence, stood as proof. Every part of my new life was a monument to the man she could no longer break. Life has a way of balancing itself. Sometimes slowly, almost imperceptibly. Sometimes with a weight so obvious it leaves no room for denial. I didn't need to interfere. I didn't need to orchestrate her downfall. Came naturally, as if the universe had been waiting all along for her choices to catch up with her. Her career, the symbol of her independence, her cunning, her control, crumbled. Projects she had once excelled at slipped through her fingers. Mistakes piled up. Rayhan, the man who had been a secret companion in her betrayal, was exposed for the manipulations he had woven behind closed doors. The world she had tried to dominate began unraveling, piece by piece, thread by thread. And yet, I felt no triumph in her failure. Not the kind that satisfies the ego. What I felt was quiet relief. Relief that the scales had been tipped. Relief that the injustice I had endured was no longer one-sided. Relief that I could finally close that chapter without bitterness pressing on my chest. I watched from a distance. No confrontation required. No words to exchange. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her remorse. I didn't need her presence in my life at all. She had taught me a lesson I would carry forever. A lesson about trust, about love, and about the depth of strength hidden within me. And the world had delivered its own reckoning. A natural consequence I had only observed, never forced. Meanwhile, my life flourished. Relationships I had neglected regained vitality. Work that had once been a chore became a stage for my growth. Even small things, the quiet mornings with a cup of coffee, the laughter shared with friends, the calm of a sunset walk, felt richer, sweeter, more alive than ever before. I had been broken, yes, fragmented in ways that hurt, ways that shook me to my core. But in that breaking, I found the pieces of myself that had been waiting all along. My true self, my resilience, my strength. And nothing could take that away, not her betrayal, not the pain I had endured. I realized that resolution isn't about revenge. It isn't about punishment. It's about witnessing justice unfold without letting it consume you. It's about trusting that balance is inevitable, and that your own rise is proof enough that survival isn't just possible, it's inevitable. One evening, I walked past the places that once held memories of her. I didn't linger in nostalgia. I didn't reach for longing. I smiled quietly with gratitude, for without her betrayal, I would never have found my strength. Without her choices, I would never have discovered my resilience. And without her, I finally learned the power of standing fully in my own life. The scales had tipped. The world had found its balance. And I had found my peace. It's strange how life teaches you lessons you never thought you'd need. I once believed love was simple. I once thought trust was unquestionable. I once gave my whole heart to someone, believing it would always be returned. And I was wrong. But in being wrong, I discovered something I had never truly known. Myself. I no longer see betrayal as a curse. I see it as a teacher. A cruel, painful teacher, but a teacher nonetheless. I walk through the world with eyes wide open now, with a heart that has learned its own strength, with a soul that no one can break, not even the person I once loved most. Mornings are quiet now. I savor them, coffee in hand, sunlight spilling across my desk, the soft hum of life around me. I smile at strangers. I laugh freely. I feel joy without reservation. I have built a life worth living, not because of anyone else, not because someone validated me, but because I chose to rise. I chose myself. I chose peace. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, I remember her. Not with anger, not with longing, with understanding. I realize now that some people come into our lives not to stay, but to show us how strong we really are. I have learned to love myself fully, to trust myself completely, to live without fear of being hurt again. I am whole. I am free. I am enough. The world is alive around me. The sun sets, painting skies with colors I had never noticed before. The rhythm of life continues, endless and beautiful. And I am part of it. Not broken, not waiting, not incomplete. I have survived the storm. I have risen from the ashes. And I will continue to rise every single day. I have learned that happiness isn't found in others. It isn't handed to you, earned by being loved, or waiting for someone to see your worth. Happiness is built within yourself. It's in the quiet confidence of knowing who you are, in the calm after the chaos, in the small, ordinary moments you finally allow yourself to feel fully. The mistakes, the heartbreak, the betrayal, they were all chapters in the story of my becoming. Without them, I wouldn't have discovered my strength. Without them, I wouldn't have realized my capacity to heal. Without them, I wouldn't have found this peace. And so I carry on. Not bitter, not resentful, not incomplete. I carry on whole, free, and unshakable. Some lessons leave scars. Some goodbyes leave echoes. And some losses turn out to be the openings you needed all along. In the end, some goodbyes are blessings in disguise. And I am finally free. I am whole. I am enough.